Imagine this: the fate of America's space program, the bold vision of sending astronauts back to the moon, and maybe even onward to Mars, now hangs in the balance, caught in a swirling storm of political intrigue, global rivalry, and billion-dollar ambitions. The world's eyes are fixed on NASA. But behind the gleaming rockets and inspiring missions, decisions are being made in Washington that could change the agency's course for generations. If you thought the drama of the original space race ended with Apollo, buckle up. The next chapter is here, and it is more unpredictable, more competitive, and more consequential than ever before. To understand how we arrived at this crossroads, let's rewind to the late 1950s. The world was in the grip of the Cold War, and the Soviet Union's launch of Sputnik was more than just a technological achievement. It was a wake-up call for the United States. President Dwight Eisenhower responded by creating NASA, making technological supremacy and national prestige inseparable from America's identity. The agency's very existence was political from day one. President John F. Kennedy's electrifying promise in the early 1960s to land a man on the moon by the end of the decade was not simply a feat of science. It was a declaration of ideological victory over the Soviet Union. The moon landing was a defining moment. But when the Apollo program was canceled after just a handful of missions, it was not for lack of imagination. It was because of shifting political winds, budget cuts, and a society ready to move on. Over the decades, NASA has soared and stumbled. The space shuttle era, which began in the early 1980s, was supposed to usher in routine, cost-effective access to space. Instead, it became a story of ballooning expenses and heartbreaking tragedy, with disasters like Challenger and Columbia reminding the world that space is never routine. The International Space Station, a marvel of international cooperation, was built with the help of former adversaries. But even it has been a pawn in the game of global politics. And today, as private companies like SpaceX and Blue Origin rise, NASA's role is shifting once again, from sole operator to orchestrator, collaborator, and sometimes even spectator. Yet, through every era, one thing has remained constant. The destiny of NASA has always been tightly bound to the priorities of those in power in Washington, D.C. Each new administration brings its own vision, its own priorities, and too often, its own disruptions. As former NASA Deputy Administrator Lori Garver has said, political appointees often prioritize short-term political gains over long-term strategic planning, hindering NASA's ability to innovate. In a field where missions are planned over decades, the consequences of political whiplash can be devastating. Fast forward to today. The drama is reaching a fever pitch. President Donald Trump has stunned the world by appointing his Transportation Secretary, Sean Duffy, as interim administrator of NASA. The announcement, made with typical flourish, has sent shockwaves through the space industry. Duffy, whose expertise is in rebuilding America's roads and bridges and overhauling air traffic control, now finds himself thrust into the cockpit of the world's most storied space agency at a time of unprecedented turbulence. Duffy's appointment follows the brief, controversial tenure of Janet Petro, who took office earlier this year and quickly moved to dismantle NASA's diversity, equity, and inclusion initiatives in accordance with executive orders from the White House. For many, Petro's policies marked a sharp turn away from the agency's efforts to open doors for women, minorities, and underrepresented groups in STEM fields. The ripple effects of these decisions are still being felt across NASA's workforce, especially among the next generation of scientists and engineers who once saw the agency as a beacon of opportunity. But the stakes go far beyond internal policies. Duffy's sudden move into the top seat is widely seen as the latest maneuver in a rapidly escalating feud between President Trump and tech billionaire Elon Musk, the founder of SpaceX. Musk, who was once celebrated as a visionary partner to NASA, now finds himself on the outside looking in. The relationship soured dramatically after the administration abruptly withdrew its support for Jared Isaacman, a Musk ally and the first civilian astronaut to command a private mission to orbit, following contentious Senate hearings. For insiders, the message was unmistakable. In the new Washington, political loyalty trumps technical expertise, even in the quest for the stars. Duffy now faces a daunting set of challenges. The agency's budget is under threat, with proposed cuts that could delay or derail flagship missions. The Artemis program, America's highly anticipated return to the moon and a stepping stone to Mars, is already behind schedule. Further cuts could set it back by years, jeopardizing not only America's leadership, but also the hard-won trust of international partners like the European Space Agency, Japan, and Canada. The Lunar Gateway, an ambitious outpost in lunar orbit, could be delayed or scaled back, disrupting a carefully balanced web of international collaboration that took decades to build. Meanwhile, NASA's Commercial Crew Program relies almost entirely on SpaceX to ferry astronauts to and from the International Space Station. This dependency is a double-edged sword. SpaceX's innovation has enabled NASA to regain its launch capability after the retirement of the Space Shuttle, but it also means that any breakdown in the relationship between Musk and the administration could put America's access to space at risk. As the rivalry intensifies, some wonder, what if Musk decides to pull back support or focus his resources elsewhere? The consequences could be catastrophic, not just for NASA, but for America's standing in the global space race. Let's not forget the global context. China has made no secret of its ambitions, landing robotic explorers on the Moon and Mars and laying the groundwork for a permanent lunar base. India, too, has made historic strides, landing a spacecraft near the Moon's south pole and developing its own human spaceflight program. Europe, Japan, and Canada are investing heavily in new technologies and partnerships. The United States, while still the world's preeminent space power, is facing competition on all fronts. The decisions made in Washington today will echo in history for decades to come. Duffy's management style adds another layer of uncertainty. Known for his tough approach to cost-cutting and government efficiency, he brings a reputation for shaking up bureaucracies and demanding results. In a fiery press conference earlier this year, he declared, "You can't cut your way to a new road, you can't cut your way to a new bridge, you can't cut your way into a new air traffic control system. So we're actually going to build in this department." His critics worry that his focus on efficiency could mean more political interference and less room for the bold, risky innovation that has defined NASA since its inception. Supporters, however, hope his leadership will bring much-needed agility and accountability to an agency often bogged down by red tape and shifting priorities. The science community is sounding the alarm. Dr. Scott Pace, director of the Space Policy Institute at George Washington University, warns, "A bipartisan consensus on space exploration is crucial to insulate NASA from the vagaries of political cycles. Without stable, long-term support, missions can be delayed, canceled, or compromised by sudden changes in direction. The risk is that NASA becomes less a leader in exploration and more a pawn in Washington's endless chess game." But amid the uncertainty, there are also glimmers of opportunity. Duffy's background in government efficiency and deregulation could make it easier for nimble private companies to work with NASA. He has a track record of supporting public-private partnerships, and some in the industry hope he will prioritize commercial lunar resource missions, such as mining ice for rocket fuel or rare minerals for high-tech industries. These projects could attract new investment and talent, and potentially spark a new era of economic activity on and around the Moon. But they also raise thorny questions about property rights, sovereignty, and international law. Who owns the resources on the Moon? How do we prevent conflicts and ensure that space remains a domain for peaceful exploration? For students and early career professionals, the stakes are deeply personal. NASA's STEM engagement programs, which fund internships, university research, and outreach to underrepresented communities, are facing potential cuts or restructuring. Joan Johnson-Freese, a national security affairs professor, cautions, "Eliminating DEI programs sends a chilling message, potentially deterring talented individuals from pursuing careers at NASA. If the agency cannot attract and retain the brightest minds, innovation could stagnate, and America's competitive edge could erode." Let's take a closer look at what might happen next. First, the budget uncertainty is real and immediate. The proposed reductions to NASA's funding threaten to delay not just Artemis, but also a host of vital science missions, from monitoring climate change to defending the planet from asteroids. The agency's Earth Science Program, which provides critical data for understanding climate trends and extreme weather, has come under political fire in recent years. Scientific journals and advocacy groups have voiced concern that political interference could undermine the credibility and utility of NASA's research. As climate-driven disasters become more frequent and severe, the stakes for global security and economic stability could not be higher. Second, the risk of a talent exodus is growing. The elimination of diversity and inclusion programs, combined with the perception of political interference, is causing anxiety among NASA's workforce. Many young scientists and engineers are weighing their options, considering careers with tech giants like Google, Apple, or Amazon, or even with international space agencies that offer a more stable environment. If NASA loses its pipeline of talent, the long-term consequences could be profound. Innovation thrives on diversity of thought and experience. Without it, the agency risks falling behind. Third, the operational risks associated with the Trump-Musk feud are unprecedented. Never before has NASA been so dependent on a single private company for critical capabilities. The Commercial Crew Program's reliance on SpaceX's Falcon and Dragon vehicles has restored America's independent access to the International Space Station. But it also means that any breakdown in the relationship could disrupt missions, strand astronauts, and damage America's credibility with international partners. The development of SpaceX's Starship, a key component of NASA's plans for lunar and Martian exploration, could be slowed or halted if political tensions escalate. Alternative launch systems exist, but they are less advanced and more costly, potentially setting back exploration timelines by years or even decades. Let's not overlook the international implications. If the Artemis program stalls, the European Space Agency's Lunar Gateway project could be set back significantly. Japan and Canada, both essential partners in the program, would have to reconsider their own investments and strategies. The carefully woven tapestry of collaboration, built over years of negotiation, diplomacy, and technical cooperation, could unravel. In a worst-case scenario, America's partners might turn to other global powers, like China or Russia, to pursue their ambitions in space. There are also national security dimensions to consider. The role of space technology in modern warfare has become increasingly clear. Starlink, SpaceX's satellite constellation, has played an essential role in maintaining communications in conflict zones, notably in Ukraine. With Duffy at the helm, NASA will have to navigate the complex intersection of civilian exploration and military strategy. The Federal Aviation Administration, previously under Duffy's leadership, has faced scrutiny over a recent uptick in close-call incidents in American airspace, raising questions about safety standards and oversight that now spill over into space operations. So, where does NASA go from here? As Sean Duffy takes the reins, the agency stands at a crossroads. On one hand, there is potential to reset priorities, streamlining operations, focusing on high-value partnerships, and accelerating commercial innovation. Duffy's experience with infrastructure and government reform could help NASA shed inefficiencies and become more agile in responding to new opportunities. On the other hand, the risks are enormous. Budget cuts could force painful choices, canceling missions, downsizing the workforce, or abandoning international commitments. The loss of diversity and morale could sap the creativity and drive that have powered NASA's greatest achievements. Let's explore some possible scenarios for the future. In the best case, Duffy leverages his experience to build bridges, literally and figuratively, between government, industry, and international partners. He champions ambitious projects like lunar resource extraction, drawing in new investors, and revitalizing America's presence on the moon. He restores NASA's reputation as a place where the world's best minds come together to solve humanity's greatest challenges. The Artemis program proceeds, albeit with some delays, and America leads a new wave of exploration that inspires a generation. In the worst case, political interference deepens. The agency becomes mired in controversy, with key personnel leaving for greener pastures. International partners lose faith and turn to other alliances. NASA's budget shrinks, and flagship missions are canceled or indefinitely postponed. The United States loses its edge in space technology, ceding leadership to China, India, or a coalition of nations willing to invest in the future. The long-term consequences would extend far beyond the space sector, affecting everything from telecommunications and navigation to national security and economic growth. Most likely, the outcome will fall somewhere in between. NASA will adapt, as it always has, to the shifting tides of politics and technology. The agency's resilience is legendary, forged over more than 6 decades of triumphs and setbacks. But the challenges ahead are formidable, and success is far from guaranteed. For viewers like you, these debates and decisions are not just abstract policy battles. They shape the technologies that touch our daily lives. From the satellites that guide our GPS and power our smartphones, to the weather forecasts that help farmers feed the world, to the breakthroughs in medicine and materials that come from studying life in space. NASA's work has a ripple effect, driving innovation across the global economy and enhancing security, prosperity, and quality of life for billions. So what can you do in the face of this turbulence? First, recognize that space policy is not just for scientists or engineers. It is a reflection of national values and priorities. Every election cycle, every budget debate, is an opportunity to advocate for long-term investment in science, education, and exploration. Support STEM programs in your community. Encourage young people, especially those from underrepresented backgrounds, to pursue careers in science and technology. Stay informed, ask questions, and demand accountability from leaders who shape the future of space. For students and early career professionals, the lesson is clear. Resilience and adaptability are as critical as technical skills. The space sector is shaped by uncertainty and change. Those who succeed are not just brilliant engineers or scientists. They're also problem solvers, communicators, and collaborators who can navigate shifting priorities and build bridges across disciplines and cultures. And for those watching the ongoing drama between Musk, Duffy, and the administration, remember that progress in space has always depended on collaboration across political, corporate, and international boundaries. The future of exploration will demand partnerships that transcend personal rivalries and partisan divides. As Bill Nelson, the current NASA administrator, has said, NASA's commitment to pushing the boundaries of human knowledge transcends political divides, requiring sustained support from all stakeholders. In conclusion, will Sean Duffy's leadership rescue NASA's ambitions or deepen its crisis? Only time will tell. He brings a track record of efficiency and infrastructure reform, but faces a hurricane of challenges: shrinking budgets, morale concerns, and a fragile web of commercial and international relationships. If he can unite stakeholders, restore trust, and refocus NASA on its core mission, America's space program could enter a new golden age. But if current trends continue unchecked, the agency risks ceding ground to global competitors and private industry, leaving behind a legacy of missed opportunities. Here's a final, little-known fact. Even as NASA grapples with politics and budget woes, private missions like Jared Isaacman's Inspiration 4 are quietly transforming science. Data collected from that mission, once dismissed as a billionaire's vanity project, is now proving invaluable to researchers studying how the human body adapts to the harsh environment of space. Sometimes, the most important breakthroughs happen outside the spotlight. If you found this story enlightening, be sure to like, subscribe, and share your thoughts in the comments below. What do you think NASA's future should look like? Who should lead the way as humanity reaches for the stars?